Now, it is my great pleasure to introduce our next speaker. Andrzej Duda is the President of the Republic of Poland. He will be speaking in Polish. And for those of you here in the room, feel free to use your headsets. There is translation available on channel 2. It should be automatic. President Duda, the floor is yours.
Excellencies, Madam President and Mr. President, ministers, distinguished guests, dear friends, thank you very much. It's an absolutely unique opportunity to speak just after His Holiness, Pope Francis, and please use your electronic devices because I will speak in my mother tongue, in Polish. So, Szanowni Państwo Prezydenci,
distinguished presidents,
dostojni goście,
distinguished guests,
proszę pozwolić wyrazić mi
please let me
satysfakcję
express my
w
satisfaction
związku z tym, że
with
pomimo obiektywnych
connected with the fact
trudności,
that due to objective difficulties,
pomimo pandemii koronawirusa,
due to the coronavirus pandemic, or in spite of the coronavirus pandemic, we can meet here today in the beautiful Bratislava, one day after the conclusion of the NATO summit in Brussels, in order to discuss the important problems, but also about the future, especially also in the context of what we have just heard from His Holiness. All of us hope that the pandemic is coming to an end and that right now is the moment to talk about the challenges which are awaiting us, but also to draw conclusions. Draw conclusions from what has happened over the last year or so, things that have affected us. Why were we not able to prevent certain things? And what we have achieved thanks to a common effort, thanks to solidarity, thanks to cooperation, thanks to mutual better understanding. We should think about what we will be able to prevent in the future. We ourselves, all future generations. Although I do hope that they will never be confronted with such a challenge. Thank you very much for inviting me to this important conference, the topic of which is so strictly connected with the global problems, the problems of our region, especially in this particular moment, which I just mentioned. Our personal, physical participation in this event would not have been possible if it was not for the security given to us by huge efforts of medical personnel and months of sacrifice connected with numerous restrictions, which I hope are already the past in their majority. Today, we are hopeful that the humanity has returned to the path of normality, that along with the vaccinations, we are able to successfully manage this crisis. Although, obviously, there is always the open question which remains, is it really the case? And I'm saying this not only in this particular speech I'm having now, because this is the question that we are asking ourselves in our unofficial conversations in the so-called bilateral formula. There's a question that also we, the presidents of the states, are asking. These were the topics of the conversations yesterday with the presidents, with the prime ministers, and these have also been the topics of the conversations we have had today. Can we say that if the number of cases in my country, in Poland, has now dropped to the daily level, which we recorded exactly 1 year ago, that is between 200 and 400 cases every day, does that really mean that we can be happy and say that this is the effect of the vaccination, or is it the consequence of the conditions, of the atmospheric conditions that we're seeing right now, the weather conditions? This is the season in which we are now. Last year we didn't have the vaccination yet, and we had the same number of cases. Nevertheless, speaking optimistically, those two elements have come together. On the one hand, there is the ongoing vaccination process in Poland. We have already vaccinated almost 25 million doses. 25 million doses have been distributed out of 38 million people. That is the population of Poland, which means that is a quite big share of the population which has received at least one shot of the vaccine. However, all of us hope that this vaccination will wipe out the coronavirus pandemic. But of course, unfortunately, the question remains whether it's going to be fully efficient. This is the question that we are still awaiting. And of course, the answer to this question is something that we have to wait for. Let me draw your attention to the fact that there are a few phenomena in the world which would have such a common character as the Sarskoftu Pandemic. This small pathogen has attacked the whole world, affecting not only the public health, but inflicting death and suffering. But first and foremost, it shook the social sense of security. It shook the foundations of the global economy. No society and no economy have been able to resist that crisis. In this context, I can underline with full conviction and very resolutely that the only successful strategy for the post-pandemic recovery of the world, including our region, the region of Central Europe, is the one which foresees what I have already said at the outset of my speech. Global solidarity, global understanding, and global cooperation is the precondition. No country can feel safe unless other states are still grappling with the epidemic and its consequences. The recovery of economies is going to be much more difficult if the entire global economic organism is not fully recovered. That is why solidarity also in sharing access to vaccines is of fundamental importance in the fight against the coronavirus pandemic. Ladies and gentlemen, the leaders are currently facing huge challenges. First of all, they have to take care of the well-being of the societies which they represent. They have to go above particularistic interests and find in themselves the readiness to demonstrate solidarity. The objective, obviously, has to be avoiding of new divisions into the better and worse ones, into the richer and the poorer ones, into those vaccinated and those not vaccinated. This is our common fight, which requires revisiting fundamental values, Christian values, which have just been mentioned in a beautiful way by His Holiness, Pope Francis. But also, we need to think about humanistic roots, which are so important to all of us. The second fundamental challenge we are facing is acknowledging the paradigm of unavoidability to confront problems which existed also before the outbreak of the pandemic and which have not gone away. That's obvious. Let us just look at the neighborhood in the European Union. Russia is continuing its actions and it has announced further steps of the character of imperial pressure. It interferes into internal affairs of other states. It violates the foundations of international law, also vis-à-vis its own citizens. We are witnessing an increasingly unpredictable actions of the Belarusian regime. We have got the oppression, we have got the limitation of any kind of civic freedom. We have got people in prisons. Since 2018, the destabilized Libya is an arena of war operations and the target of hybrid actions. The countries in the south of Europe, for many years, have been struggling with the ongoing migration crisis, which constitutes a permanent threat. We can save humanity through the eradication the global fighting of the virus or defeating the virus, but let us also remember about other illnesses such as authoritarianism, imperialism, a violation of international law and human rights. These are realistic problems which did exist before the pandemic and which we have to adopt a constructive approach to, because as I have said, they have not gone away. Your Excellencies, distinguished presidents, distinguished guests. Values are a fundamental thing. However, let us not forget that while talking about security, we also need to talk about the costs. Security is an investment, and in this very context, economy is of key importance. Fast recovery of the economies affected by the crisis is very important. But what is even more important is the model of such recovery. The post-pandemic economic order has to adopt as its departure, on the one hand, coming back to the path of dynamic growth, on the other hand, however, resilience. However, first and foremost, I would like to express my conviction that these two factors have to be correlated with one another. For I have no doubt whatsoever that the growth, in other words, the improvement of economic situation, the improvement of the welfare of the societies, by the same token, is going to build resilience. In order to obtain this resilience, in order to equip our economies with tools which are going to amortize the future possible effects of the future economic shocks, we have to revise our so far way of thinking about the network of global financial interdependencies, trade and investment interdependencies alike. The discussion concerning these problems is in the pipeline, and it's very well. The conclusions from our so far experiences, and let me just remind you that this has been the second global crisis that has affected us in the last 10 years or so, have been accounted for in the European Recovery Instrument, Next Generation EU, as well as in the national recovery plans developed by member states. This is important, that in the public debate there is a thinking about the need to give a new impulse to stimulate the production within the European Union, the effect of which will also be the shortening of supply chains, which, on the other hand, will generate more security. I wrote about it in a letter which I addressed to European leaders more than 1 year ago, and I'm happy that a lot of pleas from that letter today constitute the content of the European Union's plan developed to recover after the pandemic. I'm also happy that we express care for future generations. This is expressed, among others, by sustainable approach to climate policy, taking into account elements of social and development policy. In other words, something that we have called just transition. I have no doubts whatsoever that the recovery model adopted by Poland, based on a broad-scale program of infrastructure public investments, investments in the private sector, profound energy and digital transformation, and better effectiveness and accessibility of the public sector, of the public health services, will generate a new economic architecture, an architecture which will allow us to develop further in an unlimited way. At the same time, my homeland will be resilient to the future possible global shocks. I would like to stress very powerfully that this is the priority leading my second term in office as president, which was called Duda's plan in the last year's presidential campaign. And today, it makes part of the Polish governmental program, which is described as a new order, or finally, as a Polish order. A big enthusiasm vis-à-vis this program is reflected, among others, by objective analysis. Last week, the World Bank has revised the GDP of Poland. The forecast is now 3.8% this year and 4.5% in 2022. A similar opinion has been expressed also by the European Commission, which in mid-May increased the assessed dynamics of growth growth of Poland, up to 4% of GDP in 2021, and up to 5.4% in 2022. This model will also make part of a broader recovery plan, thanks to which our region is going to be one of the most robustly developing ones. The expected growth of GDP in Central Europe is supposed to amount to 4.6% in the nearest future. All of us hope that this forecast will come true. Ladies and gentlemen, revisiting the essential question of this debate, namely, if there is any unique, extraordinary way for the countries of our region to recover post-pandemic, I can say with full conviction and full responsibility, yes, I do believe there is such a path. Not just for one state of the region, for the states of the region, as a certain community, as an element of a big community that is of the European Union. This plan I'm referring to, this idea, this path, I believe, is the 3 Cs initiative, which is the format of regional cooperation which is complementary to the European Union integration and which speaks about tightening strategic cooperation across the Atlantic. We are lucky that this area we are talking about, Central Europe, is inhabited by nations who are extraordinarily ambitious, hardworking, and creative by nature. Nations which have gone through many experiences, nations which are not afraid of challenges. We want to harness this positive energy which is permeating the entire 3 Cs region. The initiative is developing. We are equipping it with ever newer instruments and mechanisms which define its subsequent functionalities and give it the valor of full maturity. Currently, the most important tool which supports its aims is the 3 Cs Investment Fund, thanks to which we have started to co-finance projects on a regional scale. However, there are also other tools. CEE Plus Index, 3 Cs Region Forum, combined with the Economic Congress, as well as the 3 Cs Business Forum, organized every year in the margins of the subsequent summits. We can see a big interest in cooperation with the 3 Cs initiative on part of the external partners, Japan, Greece, Great Britain, not to mention that our strategic partners, for many years now, right from the inception, we can say, have been European institutions, the United States of America, and Germany. Germany, the best developed country from the infrastructure point of view, not only in the European Union, but across the whole Europe. One of the absolutely best developed countries, if not the best developed country in the world. I profoundly believe in the sense of this cooperation. I consider the 3 Cs initiative to be the most representative formula of deeper integration of the countries of our region within the European Union and as the best way to strengthen the transatlantic bond. In this context, it's worth stressing that all the 3 strategic goals of the initiative, the development of infrastructure, energy, and digital infrastructure, are inextricably connected with security. Only strong economically and well-integrated region is able to tackle the situation during future crises. Let us hope we are not confronted with any future crisis. Nevertheless, we have to be prepared always, and I do believe that we are going to be prepared. Thank you very much for your attention.